Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rama, and I have been given the privilege of moderating the next session titled The Homeless and the Impoverished. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our esteemed speaker for this session, Datuk Munirah Abdul Hamid. Datuk Munirah is a successful entrepreneur who has established companies in fields as diverse as information technology and bioinformatics. Datuk Munirah was also the executive director and co-founder of Malaysian Genomics Resource Centre Berhad, MGRC, one of Asia's early providers of genome sequencing and analysis and genetic screening services. In addition, Datuk Munirah has been an active social worker with Pertubuhan Tindakan Wanita Islam Pertiwi since 1967. In 2010, she started the Pertiwi Soup Kitchen project. Besides providing food assistance, the Pertiwi Soup Kitchen also provides basic medical services, job placements, and other assistance to the homeless and poor in Kuala Lumpur. This session will start off in the form of an interactive session consisting of a dialogue between Datuk Munirah and myself, followed by a question and answer session during which Datuk Munirah will answer some of the questions posed by those of you joining us today. Should you have any questions, please type them out in the Q&A feature, which should be on your screen. All right, Datuk?
Hi, you hear me?
Yes, we can. I don't have you on screen though, but I'm not, okay, but you can hear me, right?
I can hear you, and you can hear me.
Yes. Oh yeah, there you are. Okay.
We can hear each other, so we're all right.
Yes, we can. Yeah, sure. All right. Perhaps I could get the ball rolling by getting you to describe the work that you do with Pertiwi in assisting the homeless and the poor in Kuala Lumpur.
Right. Okay. Where do I begin? Because, okay, to begin with, I'm not young, I'm 70. So therefore, I've come a long way in doing community work, but we're focusing on the homeless now. So I have to just limit it to the homeless and the problems in relation to COVID with regards to what we had done since March. At the beginning, when we knew about COVID, what we did was we were already doing all the precautions, taking the precautions, giving out food and making sure that they were doing the physical distancing and all that. But when MCO was imposed, what we had to do was, I was out actually the very night, March 18th. We were out with our mobile soup kitchen. We were out with the mobile medical service as well. So it was eerie, Rama. It was so eerie. I thought, is this what the end of the world looked like? It was like that. The streets were deserted, and yet the homeless were all there, worried. You see, us middle-class people, we cleared supermarket shelves because the main concern was actually food. No one was worried about the virus. Everyone was worried about food. Will we have enough to eat? So the supermarket shelves were cleared of food. But what about the homeless? They were worried about food. Will they get anything to eat? So I thought no matter what, we had to try to find ways to make sure that we did not ignore them. So that was going to be a problem, especially when we got there. At about, I think it was close to 11, our doctors, our volunteer doctors had seen the last patients. We had given out all the food, and suddenly the police came and said, pack up and leave or else. So that meant that, they were serious. If we had lingered on, we would have gotten ourselves into trouble. So I thought, okay, we had to do something. We had to find a new way to look after the homeless. What we did was, after that, the Ministry of Federal Territory and the BKL decided to give them shelters, place them in shelters. And what they did then was, you can't just round up people and arrest people. It wasn't arresting. What they did was they used the Destitute Persons Act
Right.
To round them out, which is what they normally do when they use the Destitute Persons Act 1977 to round them up. And then with the MCO as well, that was for their safety, to keep them where they would be safe. So with that, they were at 10 shelters, placed at 10 shelters, DBKL shelters, for a few months. I think the last of them only came out in July, if I'm not mistaken. So they were there for a few months. And what the NGOs did was to provide food. DPKR provided the shelters, and then we collaborated. The collaboration was really great. So, but what they relied on to have the person, all the homeless at these shelters, was to rely on those two acts. So, are we all right there? Okay. So anyhow, are we all right there?
Yes, we are. Please continue.
All right.
Yes.
So the once they CMCO, I think the next one was CMCO, was it? After
It
MCO?
was, yes.
Yeah.
After MCO was CMCO.
Yeah. Then slowly they were released, and they went back. Some of them were given jobs, and they went to Sitiawan and elsewhere, so that they would have places, hostels being given while they were being employed, and others was presumably sent back home. But what happened was most of them made a U-turn and came back to the city. So we end up having, again, the homeless, and as usual, so on my part, on the Pertiwi's part, what we did was we continued to provide food. So whether it was at the shelters or for those who still had, who live in cubicles and have no cooking facilities, we made sure that they continue to collect their meals from a restaurant. This is taking care of people despite the pandemic, despite everything. We must know that hunger is still a problem, and you must make sure that they know that they're cared for, and so that they don't panic. The one panic was always food. And but then again, we have to make sure that they understand the precautions that they need to practice. And we ourselves, while we are looking after them, we have got to remember that too. Now, that is not easy when the homeless are used to huddling. They tend to crowd together, and to educate them on that wasn't easy. We're still doing that, but I think they understand it a little bit better now, but that's still of concern. So, which goes back to now we have met and said that, what are we going to do moving forward? Yes, this situation is going to stay for a while. And, we can continue to feed like that from a restaurant where they just collect the food from the side of a restaurant. So there is minimal contact with anyone at all. So, but the issue is still there are more people losing their jobs. So, and more people are not able to pay their rental. Rent arrears, problem with in regards to rent arrears have, we hear of it every week. And the fact that we don't see them having a job in the near future. So we've got to look at it. Okay, how much fund do we still have? We've got to pay for food. We've got to help them with the rent arrears and any other problem. So this is becoming a serious problem, which we have got to sit down with the authorities, with the agencies, hopefully, and find solutions. Now, I know the government is giving bantuan from time to time, but the problem with giving bantuan is they would sometimes, the temptation when you get 300 ringgit, 400 ringgit, you splurge in 3 days, and after that, yeah. How do we do it? I don't know how. Perhaps somebody out there will understand how do we disburse a little slowly so that they can, or do we deduct already for rental or what? I don't know, because otherwise the tendency to spend as soon as any bantuan is received is very high, you know. So besides all that, we also have the issue of the children who now they're not going to school because, you know, you have to study from home or whatever, you know, and they don't have internet connections, and that is another thing. And all this, who is going to help us, I wonder. Yeah, so we always say, well, okay, let's go back and look at the Destitute Persons Act, which is to address the homeless. But then again, you know, that doesn't address the urban poor, and that is a big number of them. There are many of them. And if you don't look after the urban poor as well, the chances of them becoming homeless is very high. So in looking at this Destitute Persons Act, where many have found that it is inadequate to address the issue of homelessness. And while originally, I suppose, it was to address the issue of vagrancy, perhaps, you know, and not so much homelessness as we see it today, when people are therefore they're homeless for economic reasons, and they're not really begging, but if you give handouts, of course they'll take, but they're not there to beg. So we there have been attempts to look at a repeal of the act and perhaps coming up with something better, which is more comprehensive, which will actually look at giving them all the, you know, like the economic security. And it's not an easy thing. And then, of course, the issue again is who's actually in charge of the homeless. Yeah. So sometimes, you know, we thought, okay, for a while we were thinking it was DBKL, especially for those in KL. Yeah, the homeless, you find them in Johor, in Ipoh, everywhere. But when we're looking at KL, of course, we definitely because we work normally for all these roundups with DBKL, so we turn around and say, you know, DBKL has to be in charge. Of course, DBKL said no, it's not us. Pass it to JKM. JKM said, no, we have limited scope. Yeah. So again, with a new act, probably we can identify which is the lead agency to look after the issue of homelessness, maybe with the lead agency working with the other agencies as well, other ministries, cross ministry, you know, you've got to work like that, because the issues is not just about not having a home. Is also not having a job, is mental illness, it's all the different problems. One person can have multiple issues. So it's a complicated thing. So in looking at addressing the issue of homelessness moving forward, we also have to look at who is actually in charge and what are the things we need to do. But for now, during COVID, what we do is just, we try to make sure they have enough food. We try to make sure that, keep repeating to them, you know, wash your hands, don't huddle, whatever and whatever. And I'm hoping that there's not going to be a new cluster. Otherwise, you know, it's going to be, oh, can you imagine how we will be punished for that? You know, God forbid. So what we're trying to do is just to help them, and in the best way possible under the circumstances. And each time I go out, there's that fear. There's that fear, what if, you know? And we keep, one of our volunteers, she has a loud voice. She's the one who keeps telling, make sure, you know, Jara. And I feel sorry for her having to do that every time. But while we're trying to help, that's the only way we can do it. Help, and at the same time educate, and also mostly hope that we are not starting a new cluster.
Right. So, Datuk, if I could just perhaps zoom in on the issues that organizations such as Pertiwi have been facing since the onset of the pandemic. So has there been any external help which Pertiwi has received from society at large, from the various? Yes, it could be funding, manpower.
Funding has been very good. Amazing. I thought we were going to be struggling, but we have received funds even from overseas. People have been kind, but it's for us to be very careful. Fortunately, Pertiwi is totally volunteer run, so we don't draw any salaries. 100% of the donations go towards the food costs and everything for the target group. But in terms of volunteers, we've had to turn down, requests from student groups because we don't want that. It's too risky. So we only rely on the very few regular volunteers, and we don't need many as well. So we thought that let's just manage that way. Fortunately, funding has been good so far.
Right. That's encouraging to note.
Yes. I was surprised too. I was surprised. I thought we would be broke by now, because considering previously we were only feeding 4 days a week, 4 nights a week. Now we're doing every day, and the numbers have doubled naturally.
And you expect this trend to continue?
Because we don't know. It's so uncertain, isn't it?
Yeah.
Nobody knows what. So what I've done is I make sure that I budget for at least, I'm comfortable for at least 5 months ahead. That way I feel that there's time to fundraise. And there have been various crowdfunding platforms as well. So I'm hoping that that we can sustain. And also there have been other NGOs, they collaborate if they have vegetables and provisions, groceries, they do share with us. So that helps as well. But our medical service has not, of course, has not started, and we will not until it is safe to do so. But they can go to the government clinics. But surprisingly, most of the homeless, they have become, dependent on NGOs which provide medical street clinic. So they actually wait for the street clinic doctors. What we can do now is just make sure that if it's any follow-up treatment, we make an appointment and they go to the actual clinics run by the volunteer doctors. Yeah.
Right. Earlier you did mention the pressing need to reform the Destitute Persons Act.
Yes.
What new provisions are required really in terms of future legislation to effectively address the problem of homelessness, which by all estimates we expect, and this is something that it's a situation we expect to get worse, especially with as you had mentioned, people falling behind in terms of their rent payments and whatnot. Yes. So what do you think is the most pressing legislative reform that's required at the moment?
We have to know actually the definition, at the moment, because they were trying to address beggars, vagrancy, and not so much homelessness. In fact, if you're out there, it's assumed that you are begging, whereas right. People are there because they cannot afford to rent. Some even have 3 or 4 odd jobs, and yet they cannot afford to pay rent because they've got to send the money home. Yeah, and that's not funny when you're struggling, and even the wages they earn, they work for 3 days, they earn the wages, and after that they don't earn again for another 3 weeks or so. Very inconsistent. So for them to rent a room will be too costly. 600 ringgit for a cubicle. And have you seen? I'll bring you one day. You have a look at the cubicle. They are grotty and tiny. 600 ringgit. So anyhow, they and if you earn so little, you have to send back to support your money, your family back home in the kampong. You can't do that. So to me, we've got to look at the issue of homelessness differently and give them the proper definition and which is the agency to handle that subject. And then after that, for each of the problems, identify the agencies that the lead agency can communicate with and reduce the amount of bureaucratic red tape. Sometimes it makes it impossible to solve even one person's many problems because you're sent from one department to another and with no real solution, and then sometimes you're required to produce documents which they cannot produce. So a person may have a problem which cannot be solved at all. So we want to simplify so that it's easier for them to have a home. So it's easier for them to work. So it's easier for the kids to have documents. I mentioned to you that some of the children, they are considered illegitimate because the parents are not legally married. And then we say, why aren't they legally married? Tapi pakcik saya wali kan. So pakcik wali kenapa tak pergi? It's like that, you see. And then before you know it, the child is born and then the child is illegitimate. But they say, no, we are married. Oh.
Right. It's interesting that you mentioned that because I think not many people actually realize that legal issues tend to be just as, profound as issues of concerning the lack of basic necessities. So,
Yes, sometimes we forget, most people look and say, why are you feeding the homeless? They are lazy. No, you don't understand, the problems that they have inherited.
Yeah.
And then they're continuing. They themselves have created more problems at the end of the day. Oh my gosh,
So the problem is more structural and systemic rather than, due to the individual per se.
Yeah, that's a percentage, of course. The laziness and all that, the drug addiction, that's a percentage, yes. But you've also got all these others with, complexity of problems. Yeah.
Mm. All right. Datuk, there have been some questions streaming in.
Yes.
Perhaps I could, address some of them to you.
Okay.
Of course, one question that I've received is, it reads, now that Sabah is feeling the brunt of COVID, is there any program Pertiwi has for Sabah?
Yes, we have recently for the frontliners at the Queen E Hospital. They've asked for meals, so we're working with another part with someone who will provide the food there for the frontliners there.
Okay, so there are some ongoing efforts.
Yes.
All right. Okay, and another question that we have is it is said here, I tend to agree so much that we need a multi-sectorial approach to solving this massive problem. But I want to know if our systems are sustainable. I know DBKL, police, and medical tried to do something, but it just fizzled out. So what do you think we should look into?
Recently, last month actually, JKM, KPWKM, actually, the Kementerian Wanita, they organized a retreat. Well, we had a 1.5 day retreat to discuss again the repeal of the Destitute Persons Act, and to look at the other agencies were all invited as well, the agencies which are normally involved, and I hope that they will do something a little, just have a proper action plan to come up with. Have a relook, do it properly, yeah? If you're going to repeal the act, what do you do? How do you come up with a new one? And then make sure that it addresses all the problems so that moving forward, we have something that's ownership. Which agency is responsible for what? We don't want to say, right, can you please attend to that? Oh, no, it's not my job, So everybody, the homeless, it's just like that. It's nobody's baby. Not mine. Oh, it's not mine. So Whose is it then? So meanwhile, we just do as best as we can with the current legislation and hope that it will improve. And actually, we started discussing this in 2015 or 2016, but with the change of government, change of people at the top who are leading this initiative, it keeps, it gets dropped off, and then after somebody picks it up again. I hope this time there's going to be a champion from someone, even JKM, anyone, just lead it and make sure that we see it through and pass something which is adequate and covers. It's not an easy problem to solve. Other countries in the world also have not found something which is comprehensive, but let us try. Don't just say just because they cannot find one that we cannot, To me, let us sit down and try to address as best we can. And then we improve it along the way, rather than just say, oh, it is too enormous a task, and drop it.
Right. So just to follow up on that, Datuk, and this question is coming from me. It's not from the audience. Okay. In terms of stakeholder engagement, you said there's this need to have a more collaborative effort. Yes. In your experience, have the various government agencies attempted to engage organizations like Pertiwi in terms of formulating, a more targeted, a more cohesive strategy of dealing with the issue of homelessness?
We normally work together, Kementerian Wilayah, Kementerian Wanita, DBKL and all that. We normally work together. But it's just that we have not come up with a real solution. It's more ad hoc rather than, okay, we're going to do the homeless head count. Let's go out and do the homeless head count. Or that time when we had recently, because of COVID, let's put them in shelters so that we can look after them. It's more, it's not, if only we know that in the event of this is what we do, we have a proper structure in place, proper modus operandi and all that. We don't.
Right. Okay. Now, if I could just move on to the issue of someone has asked about securing employment for the homeless, and this individual is wondering, how does Pertiwi help the homeless obtain work?
Okay, when we know that there is anyone who's looking for a job, we try to connect. Yeah. But we always have to be careful in identifying the right candidates as well. The majority of our people have very short attention span. So if you just say you're going to the 9-to-5 job, they forget it. I know they probably last less than a week. You see, so. In terms of anything else, we have found employment like for a companion, for an elderly person. We have found employment in restaurants, all that. That's okay, yeah. But the 9-to-5 job is a little bit hard. And what I would prefer is actually to start them off in small enterprises, small businesses, because they like to do that. They like to work independently. And this is where we're looking at now, trying to work with corporate organizations to come up with skills training for them, the sort of skills training which will be of interest to them. Don't force them to do something which they don't want to do. We want people to keep on working. Sustainable. It's always looking at sustainability rather than just finding a job and saying, yeah, they found a job. Then what next? Can the person continue to work there? That's what we want. The sustainability is important.
Right. So in terms of the type of work that you're able to secure for those who are homeless, what are can you perhaps describe the type of jobs that they've been able to secure?
In the past, it used to be security guard. They like security guard. They like that. Even the women, yeah. And then some of them, the cleaners, they like that. And of course, working in F&B outlets. But F&B outlets, I think I mentioned to you when we're having a chat, that there's a concern of them having, any diseases, communicable diseases or something like that. You see, so whether it is safe for them to be working in the F&B outlets, yeah.
But that, on the, if I may just pause there, but surely if they were to be working in an F&B outlet, the onus would be on the restaurant owner to ensure that they comply with all the screening requirements.
No, but it's costly, isn't it? It's costly. Yeah, but especially now, sometimes you see what we've noticed is that they like to work in restaurants, because it's easy, easy money. You can be a waiter, you can be, help, a kitchen help. And then they can work for 2 or 3 days, they get wages. And sometimes they last for longer than what I thought they would. But at times it's just for the week or the month or the 2 weeks. And do you think any employer will want to screen them if they're going to work only for 2 or 3 weeks? It's not cheap to screen.
Right. So this issue of so it's a very transient workforce, if you like, this subsector of workers from within the homeless community.
Yeah.
And is that perhaps because they are unable to hold down a regular place to stay?
They sorry, the first part of your question was what?
Because it seems to me that the workforce within the homeless community, there's this issue of them being transient in nature.
Transient,
yeah. So and what contributes to that? Is it the fact that they can't hold down a regular place to stay? Or?
That plus the fact that it is in their nature, and also because you don't expect. There are some of them who cannot read, you don't, they can't read or write. They can just, they're able-bodied, but they cannot read or write because they dropped out of school very early now, which is another problem now because the children are dropping out of school early as well. Some go to school just for 2 months and drop out. Some, and the parents are not even sending them to school. There are many of them like that. And then that is really worrying for me, and worrying for us. We say, what do we do? Let's teach them some skills. They're not going to be reading history or geography. No way. And some of them, 11 or 12, still cannot read. Yeah, so that's going to be a real concern. Yeah, so which is why some of them like to work in restaurants. Is it? Restaurants is easy. You're a kitchen help, you're a waiter, you're a whatever, you can make drinks or whatever. But the issue is, again, because there's a Food Act and the food hygiene regulations. So what is of concern is, of course, TB. We've seen that re-emerging, right? TB, and there's always typhoid, for example, and that's at risk to the public. Yeah, and then but the owner of the restaurant or F&B outlet will say, right, we want to operate, we are short-handed now, and along comes someone looking for a job, and it's just a perfect match, isn't it? Yeah, you're looking for someone, and an able-bodied person comes along, you hire. But then again, what about the public? Yeah. So how do you balance that? That one you cannot say that there's no adequate law. There is already. But enforcement. How do you monitor? It's not easy. One, you can have the law, and then you can have everything, but enforcement is going to be an issue also. So,
right. Okay. Datuk, as this session has been going on, we've actually had quite a few inquiries from our participants as to how they could assist Pertiwi in providing assistance to the homeless.
Well, for now is we're just going to make sure they have food, and then let us hope that the situation improves so that we're not going to go for another lockdown, because in the event of another lockdown, God forbid, we will have to work again the way we were doing before. But if things improve, we are really seriously looking at giving skills training even for the young children who've dropped out of school, it's not just about the homeless. The problem now is the urban poor as well. And that is a really big numbers we're looking at. The homeless is only about, in KL, there's only about 700. In JB recently, the numbers have increased a lot more actually, because the workers, those who are working in Singapore are now waiting. They're waiting until they can go back, you see, and they're not going to leave JB as soon as the borders are open. They just want to go back, you see. So we've got them there. We've got the ones in Sabah. We've got the ones in Ipoh, in Melaka, in Penang. So the homeless are everywhere, yeah. It's just that the biggest numbers are probably in Johor Bahru and in KL. So we're looking at the homeless, and also we cannot ignore the urban poor. That community, because you've got the youth, the kids that I was dealing with before, suddenly they're taller than I am, and before I knew it, they're becoming pregnant. That is the saddest part for me, when the young girls become pregnant, and I say, oh my gosh, this is where, the grandma in me comes out and just sits there and start to cry. And then and I go to the mother, and the mother just, it was like, oh well, oh well, such
Things happen.
I am the one who's feeling, oh my God, I have failed. So how do we deal with this? If anyone is clever enough out there or have got some new ideas, please connect with us. Let's work together, and we come up with programs along with everything else that needs to be done, the Destitute Persons Act and all that. Let us look at programs moving forward. Once, we have to assume that, we will overcome COVID, and then we'll move on. And then we've got to look at problems ahead of us. If we don't address the children and the youth, we're going to have bigger problems and a bigger number of homeless probably.
Right. So Datuk, for those seeking out volunteering opportunities with Pertiwi, for the various initiatives that you had just mentioned, especially in terms of reskilling and providing skills training opportunities, how do they go about reaching out to you? Is Pertiwi's details available online?
Well, the website I have not updated. I'm so sorry. I last updated in 2012. Oh my gosh, help me. And then, but I post regularly on Facebook, Pertiwi Soup Kitchen, because of Facebook, the Soup Kitchen is the one that's most active. And then you can give my number, of course. Yeah, I'm most welcome for anyone to contact me and discuss. I'm willing to discuss with anyone just to help the poor, because if we don't do that, sometimes we think our problems are so enormous, but other people are facing bigger hurdles than we are, and so let us do something. It's good when you try to help someone, you find that our problems are not that bad really.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that information, Datuk. I'm sure they'll be able to reach out to you on your Facebook page.
Or just to WhatsApp me. I'm fine.
All right. Yeah, because we actually have had quite a few messages come in inquiring about volunteering opportunities. So yeah, to those of you out there, you know what to do now.
Yeah, just contact me.
Right. Okay. So we are almost at the end of our session. Any parting thoughts about what you would like to see implemented most urgently, or your message to the rest of us out there?
Well, I would like to see, the government agencies working together seriously to address this problem. Let's not drop it and put it on the back burner, because I think if you put it on the back burner, we are not going to be addressing it. I know there are so many urgent matters, so many that need to be given a higher priority. But this is about the poor. Let us not put it on the back burner. If we need to to repeal the current act and give something which is more adequate to address the problem, let us do so. And let everyone work together and collaborate. we should not be selfish about doing this. Even NGOs work together and focus on each other's strengths so that we can achieve more. This is not about competing. This is about collaborating to achieve more, to help the community. And then it's about being kind and compassionate, and it's about serving with humility. Let us do so. This is the pandemic especially has taught us that we have to care for each other. We have to do it because no one else will. If we're even to make sure that the world is safe, we are responsible for it. We are responsible for each other, so let us do it.
All right. Thank you very much, Datuk. It's been a pleasure having you on board today. And thank you for speaking at our event. I would now like to pass the floor to Dr. Hassan, who will be moderating the next session. Over to you, Dr. Hassan.
Thank you.